Okay, we're going to talk about those viewports again. This time we'll talk about the settings, which we access over here usually by right-clicking on the name of the viewport. So if I right-click here, I get this menu. Here's where you can choose your views if you don't want to use the different buttons to access them. Usually left, right, these two go together, top and bottom, obviously front and back. And here's your user and perspective views. That much is pretty easy, and I usually use the buttons, and I just usually use a top, a front, a left or a right view, and a perspective or a user view. And down here, you get to choose what you'd like to see this object in, or what you want the viewport to render as. You can see wireframe will render as a wireframe object. I'm going to select all these and change the colors so we can see them. So this is my wireframe object. You can tell it's very high poly. Not optimized at all, but nice looking. We can zoom in to our wireframe and we can work on it in wireframe if we want. That's wireframe. Under Other, you get some different choices. You can hit Smooth. There's Faceted, which will show us the facets or those areas between the edges. This is just faceted. This is flat. A lot of these look very similar. Lit wireframes, which actually shows the wireframes being lit. It's not the most useful as far as I'm concerned. And bounding box. And we use this one when we have really high poly objects, just like we have, and we want them to move around a little bit quicker. Now, I'm going to go back to smooth with highlights here. And we can go down here to edged faces. Now this is probably the most useful combination. This shows the edges along with the smoothed solid version. And that's this configuration with edged faces checked and smooth highlights. I use that one quite a bit. You can also use transparency here, and this will adjust your transparencies if you need it. Here's where you can show the grid or not show the grid. We've been hitting G all along to do that. And I think everything else here, your viewport clipping is located here, and that will help you if you're clipping out areas. Here's your little adjustment. You can see as I move these up and down that I can clip my viewport. Usually we don't want to clip the viewport, but you might have trouble with the viewport clipping because of scale issues, and that's where you would fix it. I'm going to turn that off now. You'll see it disappear. And then down here under Configure, we can go under Configure and set all sorts of other settings. Here's everything that we had before with our different types of rendering. Over here we get lots of different choices. The one that we use the most is probably Shade Selected Faces, and that's how we turn the faces red when we select them. And we come back to that under Edit Poly, but just so you know what I'm talking about, just in case it becomes important, if I select this particular object, let's select this big particular object, I'm going to collapse that down just so that it looks simple. You can see I can select these areas and they turn red as I work on them. If I turn that off, Shade Selected Faces off, you'll see that they're just red outlines. I like them to turn solid red because it makes it easier for them to see, so I usually have this checked on. Just like that. Okay? Okay, and a couple other things about our viewports here. We can change how these objects render by clicking on the object and click on right-click on that and go to Properties for the particular object, and you can see you get more choices here. You could say see-through for that object or display as a box just for that object, and now just that object will display as a box. And we can go back to its properties, turn that back off, and you can see you've got lots of choices here on how you want this to display. That becomes important when we get a little bit too high poly. That'll come into play a lot. So I've turned it back on. Okay? So those are your different viewport settings. Remember, they take place for each viewport individually. So each one of these you can click on and change your settings for each different viewport. All right?